Go back into South Bend's history. 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, and what do you see? You see groups of people working to bring change to this city. They had different ideas of what that change should be. They didn't always agree. Yet, in every decade, there were groups of people for whom positive change was their life's work. This podcast, South Bend's Own Words, features the voices of people who helped make the city change. We'll share clips from the oral histories done by the Indiana University South Bend Civil Rights Heritage Center that tell a more complete history of the city. It's the story of many cultures, not just one. It's the story of South Bend. On June 29, 1922, several hundred people attended a special 2-hour evening opening of the new Engman Public Natatorium. By September, South Bend's Parks Board estimated almost 10,000 people took advantage of the brand new facility. People in South Bend pushed for a place to learn and practice swimming as early as 1881. Around that time, the South Bend Tribune wrote, "Our city has never yet had a place where boys and girls could learn to swim, except the treacherous river, where from 3 to 6 lives are lost every summer." The natatorium was the result of a decades-long push for a safe place to swim, though not for everyone. It is unclear exactly when the white people in charge of the natatorium first denied entry to African American people, but they did. And as a taxpayer-funded, supposedly public facility, it became a focus of local civil rights action by a group of doctors, lawyers, politicians, and other black professionals pushing against an entrenched system of discrimination. By 1936, they secured limited access 1 day a week. Hardly a victory when one's skin color is still seen as a barrier for full equality. Rather than stay silent or give in to established norms, the activists kept pushing. And finally, in 1950, the natatorium formally desegregated. People still experienced discrimination there after that, for sure. It was not, nor was South Bend ever, truly integrated. But officially, South Bend residents of color were to be fully allowed any day of the week. By 1978, the natatorium was hardly brand new. It was over 50 years old, and it was falling apart. Years of deferred maintenance met up with sinking attendance, and officials started asking whether it was time to shut it down. Paul McMinn was just out of college then. Bob Goodrich offered him a job to run the natatorium. Neither of them knew it would be the Nats' last open season. In 2018, I sat down with Paul and Bob, and also Bob Heiderman, who taught classes at the natatorium and other pools in South Bend. As we're now over a century since the natatorium first opened, I thought it was fitting to hear Paul and the two Bobs talk about the last days of the Engman Public Natatorium. Immediately to my left, can you just state your name, please?
Paul McMinn.
Bob Heiderman.
Bob Goodrich.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. A little bit about each of your backgrounds first. I just want to start about where you were born and raised. Are you all from South Bend? I'll start with you, Paul.
Yes, I'm from South Bend, and actually I'm from the west side.
Nice.
Went to Holy Cross and went to LaSalle. Okay. So this isn't far from the neighborhood I grew up in.
I'm Bob Heiderman. I was born and raised in Chicago, Park Ridge, Illinois. I went to Notre Dame High School there, and then Notre Dame High School brought me down here to South Bend, and that's when I got into aquatics because I like swimming. Mm-hmm. I got into the aquatic program with Paul and Bob Goodrich.
I'm Bob Goodrich. I came to South Bend in 1965 from Indianapolis. Was the assistant director, recreation director here for about 10 years, then became director for about 10 years. The natatorium, of course, was one of our responsibilities at that time.
Yeah, that's actually leads into my next question, which was how you got your start at South Bend Parks and Recreation. So you shared yours after coming here in 1965. Paul, when did you get your start with Parks and Rec?
Actually, this was the job that I was hired, was to be the director of this.
Mm-hmm.
So after graduating from IU down at Bloomington, this was my first full-time job. And I've been with the department for the next 41 years. I'm working on my 5th decade now.
It's amazing.
Something interesting about Paul's background. We hired him and put him in the natatorium as a director. And 6 months later, we closed the natatorium. Then we hired him to our office later on. And 10 years later, they closed our office. So Paul has just kind of been a loser.
Yeah, so far,
Isn't that right, Bob?
You're the closer. You're the hatchet person they bring in.
But see, what Mr. Goodrich isn't telling you is that he also, one of the neat things in our community is the East Race Waterway. So while one door opens another, and one time when I was a young person, Mr. Goodrich said, by the way, Paul, we knew it was coming. He goes, but you're the aquatics guy. You're going to be in charge of it. Imagine the $6 million, the city, the department. I go, whoa. I don't know anything about fasting. He goes, oh, you'll learn. So 2 years of not sleeping nights, and now we put down 400,000 people and started the River Rescue School. So what he says, he's only telling you the doors that close. He's now also telling you the doors that open, especially one big one that he said, hey, have fun, bye.
That's a long and distinguished career, though. I mean, that's a lot of stuff here in the city. We have almost 5 decades of working with various places. What about you, sir?
I started lifeguarding in Chicago on the beach. I like water. So when I came down here, after 2 years I was a brother at Notre Dame. And after 2 years there, I got involved with Denny Stark. And Denny Stark got me down to the park department and doing.
Who's Denny Stark?
Denny Stark is a swim coach at Notre Dame, and he was running lifeguarding classes, and so then I came down to see Mr. Goodrich and Paul and that, I started before you did.
Oh yeah, you're a lot older than I am.
What year did you get your start here?
I think it was 64.
So, Paul, when you started here as the director in 1978, basically, 1977. How old were you?
Just out of college, 21, 22.
Not a bad job for right out of college, being director of
I would like to share with you the first time I came to the building was when I was in high school. So that was my first time meeting Bob. Little did I know that I'd go on to end up being his boss 1,000 years later, and he's still working for us.
I can tell him about the bread joke. Yeah.
And let's use, instead of just Bob.
Bob Heiderman.
Thank you.
Bob Heiderman.
I'm really interested in, and I think you, Paul, you might be able to answer this best, just the day-to-day operations. What's it like to run this pool?
It wasn't a million things going on. Mm-hmm. So, but it was still nice. So, for instance, when I forget if we opened at 12 or 1, the first hour was lap swimming. And so you had your regulars that you knew them by the first name, and they'd come in and swim.
But not many.
No, not many.
2, 3, 4 people were a good day.
Yeah.
Or a good lap swim.
Right. And then followed by that, when the schools got out, then we had open swimming. The Marlin Swimming Club was here. Mm-hmm. And so that would be kind of like a supper break for me then, during that time that the Marlins were here. And then I'd come back, and then it would be open at night from, say, 7 to 9 or something like that, or 6 to 8. But it was then a night session. And the nights were sometimes really packed with a lot of people. But it was a nice place to work. There were a lot of people from the community. And
George, are you aware that back in the days you're talking about?
Which days, the 1970s? Or?
Well, 40s, 50s.
During the segregation era,
the blacks were not allowed in the pool. Mm-hmm. Are you aware of that story? And they would, one day a week, they would drain the pool?
Please clarify that, because we've heard, okay, so we've heard a lot of things. We have heard stories that the pool had been drained. We've also heard that in order to drain a pool, it takes upwards of 3 to 4 days and about 3 to 4 to refill it to get the chemical balance right. So the idea that you'd be able to drain and then refill can't possibly happen.
I think
That's the story that we tell. That
I'd say you're partially right. It doesn't take 3 or 4 days to drain it. Probably takes a day and a half to fill it.
And then
still,
then you got your chemicals.
Okay, your chemicals, and then normally though, you even have to, before you can open it, have to test the water and have them approve it, blah, blah, blah.
So to clarify that story, I wasn't here then either.
Right.
So I'm hearing the same thing you heard.
right.
At a minimum, because we don't know how much flow of water can come in, how
Sure.
big the pipes were.
Sure.
So a minimum 3 days, and
Right.
if the pipe, it could be 5 or 6.
And then it takes 2 or 3 days just to
Get the
get
chemicals
the
right.
heat up to it.
Yeah, so
You have
that,
to heat it.
Yeah.
so that story doesn't make any sense physically.
Well, what does make sense though is when you think of whom that story serves to hurt and whom it helps. If you hear that story, that there's yet another reason why you feel like you don't belong. You're told you don't belong on some days, and now here's another way that you don't. That becomes the myth, that becomes the rumor, and that serves to reinforce that feeling that you're not welcome. And that's the way that we tell it now.
Right. Yeah.
The story was out there, and people understood it and believe it, and I still hear it every now and then.
And perception becomes
But
reality.
the perception, but we work to understand where that line is. That yes, the perception was there, but it's hard for us to figure out how the reality of that happening. Oh, where was your office?
My office was probably on the wall watching because you were a lifeguard.
Down the rampway.
Yeah, the ramp. So, but because most of the part, you were always watching the pool, so
Right.
you didn't.
There was a little area where you had a desk and you had a chair, and
You know what? I don't even remember.
that's
having this.
where Frank
Maybe
spent
because I
most
was
of his time.
maybe I was working all the time, boss. I wasn't sitting there. He's still my boss. I gotta tell him, work. Remember Mayor G. Krebs? I was working. I wasn't sitting at some desk. Being a good lifeguard.
So, Paul, when you were here, the pool was 50 years old. Was the equipment 50 years old too?
Oh yeah. So the whole place, and that even my little term of 6 months, but when you could look up at the ceiling, and we had the repairmen coming all the time, and you could see that it's basically was on its last legs, and band-aids, and the cost of just trying to keep it up. At some point, it's an old car, then how much you're going to keep trying to fix it up. So the structure, the chemicals, the water, the thing, and even the structure of the building, the ceilings and everything started to fall in. And then really, towards the very end of, I started in January, and by May or June, it got even a lot worse, and everything more or less blew up. And then, well, Mr. Goodrich could tell you the political decisions. All I knew was, do I have a job all day? My pool just fell apart.
I don't know that there was really a political decision. It was more what you have to do. The ceiling was leaking, the tile was coming off the pool. The building was old. The South Bend Community School Corporation built 5 swimming pools, which was really the demise of any facility like this. It was just an economic decision, I guess. I would say attendance was poor, and
It was a 20-yard pool, same as Central had a 20-yard pool, where you had to swim 5 laps to do your 100.
I'm also led to understand that in 1922, this had one of the early applications of an ultraviolet cleaning system or ultraviolet filtration system. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, I do remember hearing that say. So at the time, it was state of the art.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Didn't they have a sand filter when you were here? When we were here, I think it was.
I think they did, but I
Did you
think
say a sand filter?
Yeah.
S-A-N-D?
Yeah.
What's a sand filter?
It just the water goes through the sand,
Okay.
and cleans it, and then you have to
Purifies
backwash
it, yeah.
the sand.
I do remember hearing the bragging point about at the time.
People who used this pool, would you say mostly adults, mostly children?
Mostly children.
And were they all from the neighborhood? Mostly white, mostly people of color?
Mostly from the neighborhood. But that there were a mix.
Sure.
It wasn't like one total group. Or especially on Saturdays, or it'd be a different group sometimes all the time, and sometimes it'd just be neighborhood kids.
How much did it cost to come in 1978?
15 or 20 cents seemed like what we charged here for kids, and it might have been a quarter for adults. But we also had a season pass that you could buy, which was really, I don't know, might have been $5, $10 at the most for the year. It certainly was not a moneymaker.
I was going to say, and even in this, I know inflation makes it a difference, but still, even then, a quarter or $5 is not that much. And that's actually that leads into my next question about the economics. You're part of the budget making process of balancing a lot of different facilities throughout the city. You said attendance was low, and attendance maybe brought in 20 to 25 cents a pop. So ticket sales were not enough to make this place a moneymaker. No, is that true?
No.
So this was a drain on the budget rather than this drained the city's budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd use the word drain, but
okay. Pun intended.
Did have a drain. Yes, certainly.
But Mr. Goodrich, wouldn't you say that people didn't look at it as drain? They looked at it as it's a public service, and only more and when I first started, we still looked at it like that. That you didn't have to make money. When we started the East Race, we charged $1. Even back in, so that there wasn't that pressure on you to. It was considered a city service, no different than having a police or a fireman to have a pool.
That was basically the philosophy of the department, and I think the city as a whole. The council and everybody that offered budgets. And within the last 10 years, maybe 15 years at the most, that feeling has changed. At one time it was, people would say, we pay taxes, we deserve this, we want it, and therefore it was given to them. But as budget constraints became stronger and people looked at money and income, the philosophy just changed here. Didn't change in the department, but it changed downtown.
And yet, part of the economic equation was the fact that this pool, by this time, by 1978, was over 50 years old. Had cracks in the ceiling, had 50-year-old equipment, was incredibly small. So I'm wondering how the conversations about closing it started and came to be. Do you remember when you first heard about people closing it?
Well, it would have been up to the park board. And when I came here in 65 and I didn't close till 78, they were talking at that time, I don't think very seriously, but they were talking about and looking at the natatorium, and is this something that we can continue to sustain, or should we be thinking about closing it or selling it or whatever? And then the selling of it became an issue. I think there were a couple offers made, or I'm not real sure on that, except the family that donated this originally,
the Engmans,
yes, had in the agreement that it had to be a swimming pool and it had to be maintained by the park department. So that put a stoppage on any thinking in those terms. And I think once they got that determination that, I shouldn't put it this way, but they were stuck with it. I think then they seriously begin to look at it and say, we're going to close it. Because we just can't afford to put the money in it that it would take to, it would be rebuilding the whole thing. And they weren't interested in doing it.
At that time, all the schools, Sal opened, Jackson opened, they all had pools.
Yeah.
And we used them.
Yeah, so for instance, we used to do Learn to Swim back then.
We used them every nights and on weekends.
But it wasn't, and it's like, I think when you look at the equation, as we keep saying, well, now we have 5 pools. So now we can do family swim, we can do aqua aerobics, we can do lifeguarding, and now we can do it in 5 different locations.
And we were filled.
Yeah.
They had people waiting in line on Saturday morning to sign up their kids for Learn to Swim.
It was unreal. And you know what we charged? $3 for 10 lessons. But again, it's going back to that philosophy that people paid their taxes and they deserved it.
Right.
And
so were there people, though, who argued in favor of keeping this building open at any point from the 60s through the 70s?
there was can't think of what it was, across the street was
It's the Hansel Center.
Hansel Center,
Children's Hospital.
they wanted it to stay open. And at one time they wanted to use it, just, I'm not going to say buy it, but they were very interested in bringing the kids over and that sort of thing. That may have been one group that showed some interest, but I don't know of any others.
Do you remember that last day?
No. They all merged together. That just another one. And I really probably, when it all kind of started, we closed, I think, pretty much on the normal schedule, but barely. And so I guess at the time you're thinking, well, I'll be back next, and that, but we knew there was a lot of problems. We knew that there was a possibility, but I guess I didn't think that was my last time out the door, which it ended up being it.
It did happen pretty quick.
Yeah.
The decision was been talked about, and you expected it, but you didn't know when. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, locked the door.
And I think when we were closed for the season, I think by that time they did, how much it's going to cost, how much work does it need, and then the more ceiling fell in, and by the time they got on all the reports and stuff, but when we closed, we didn't have all that data yet to know.
So the season ended what month?
Usually in May.
When did the season start?
No, this building was closed in the summertime because then we had the outdoor facilities.
Gotcha.
So it closed sometime in May because then we open up the other ones.
Gotcha. Did either of you come back to the building or drive by the building after it?
Oh yeah, I driven by it.
Yeah, because when I go, Kennedy Pool's still just down the street, of course. And actually, my family owns one of the houses, or used to, like 5 doors down. So sometimes I like to go by and look at where I started and see my cousin's house down the street.
It was always fun to drive by here because of the magnificent houses that old and beautiful.
So the pool sat empty how long before you came in?
So we came here, so we transformed the building in 2010. So almost or over another 30 years. And that's perfect for my next question. Well, actually, you already spoke about during the time that it was closed. We're still involved in Parks and Rec. We're still technically own the building, is my understanding. There were various people who tried to find new uses. Did that ever get to either of you? Did you guys hear about some of those?
I remember that one proposed use was to put a platform over the pool area and make it a boxing center for the youth on the west side primarily, but open to all people. That was one. There was talk about making it a youth center. There wasn't a lot of room and what you could do. But again, he talked about putting a platform over the pool. Mm-hmm. And maybe setting up a basketball goal and a couple of pool tables and a study table, and that was it. But none of this ever came to fruition. It was just people had ideas. And there were more, but I just don't remember all of them.
I had heard a story of a gentleman who wanted to buy it and turn it into a private home. And then another one who wanted to turn it into like an art gallery. So I hadn't heard the boxing yet.
The art gallery
Yep.
was another one.
You gentlemen then stayed with Parks and Recreation for a long time, made long careers out of it, and it's gone through many changes. I wondered if you could just speak briefly about the changes in Parks and Rec since, and especially now that it's become this new thing, venues, parks, and arts.
It was interesting though, because now we have, you're right, it's venues, so we have Century Center, we have, and the new boss said, okay, I'd like to go around the table and say, how has the last 2 years affected you?
And by the new boss, you're talking Aaron Perry, the new
right. Mm-hmm. So they go around the table, and I'm sitting here listening to all of them talking, and I'm going, they don't get it. We have $50 million for parkland. And I said, and a third of that money is coming from economic development. I said, I don't think you understand for the people long before you know how much we wanted economic development money. Oh, all of a sudden it's quality. Well, we've been saying that for 100 years, you know. So what I don't think that all of you get is now it's quality of place. Now we want to make it big. Now it's economic development. It's where you live and help the community and how important. But I mean, from our standpoint, we preach that our whole lives. But now to have the council, to have the mayor, to have the community all see the importance of parks. I mean, we felt like we've been screaming that our whole lives.
South Bend's Own Words was created by Kevin Tidmarsh and me, George Garner. This episode was produced by Donald Britton from the Ernestine M. Racklin School of the Arts at IU South Bend and by me through the Civil Rights Heritage Center. Visit us and learn how IU South Bend students inspired the transformation of a once segregated South Bend swimming pool. We give guided tours and offer public events that show how the history of oppression echoes through the city today. See and hear more history, plan your visit, or share your thoughts about this episode. All at crhc.iusb.edu.